Welcome to the ACEIT podcast, where we turn science into sense. As we begin our 11th season, I wanted to let you know that JCOIN has a new O. That's right. The formerly Justice Community Opioid Innovation Network is now the Justice Community Overdose Innovation Network. Same wonderful network, same awesome podcast, but with a broader emphasis. So I am so excited that you're with us. I'm Danielle Rudes, your host, and this is ACEIT. Welcome to episode 3 of season 11 of the ACEIT podcast. On today's episode of our season on substance use disorder, overdose, and loved ones, we're talking about children's experiences. That is, people's experiences of being a child with a substance use disorder or overdose incident, and of being a child to a parent with a substance use disorder or overdose incident. There is a lot of research out there on being the child of a parent with substance use disorder overdose incidents, but there's less about children's experiences with having a substance use disorder overdose incident. Today, let's talk through the existing research. First, some context. Over 8 million children in the United States live with a parent with a substance use disorder. That comes from Palumbo and Company, 2022. And from 2011 to 2021, over 300,000 children lost a parent to a drug overdose. The highest rate was found among non-Hispanic American Indian and Alaska Native populations. That data comes from Jones and colleagues, 2024. And looking at children, by the time children have reached 12th grade, nearly 50% have tried illicit drugs. The numbers for 2023 overdoses among children are still unclear, but one study found that the number of overdose deaths among adolescents has risen steadily since 2010, with 1,146 adolescents dying of a drug overdose in 2021. That data comes from Friedman and colleagues, 2022. Okay. So with that context in mind, let's first talk about children's experiences of having a parent with substance use disorder or overdose incident. Let's talk about 2 studies that aim to understand the context and experiences of children with parental SUD overdose. Palumbo and colleagues 2022 observed 9 children who were participating in a program that was designed to support children of addicted parents. They conducted a thematic analysis of the verbal responses and nonverbal behaviors of children participating in this program. They found that children had views of what a parent should be: stable, secure, reliable, but often they did not experience these with their parents who misused substances. Children witnessed all stages of addiction, including interacting with parents while they were under the influence, going through withdrawal, when they relapsed, when they overdosed, and when they were in treatment. The children explained that they often felt anger about their parents' drug abuse and of their perceived irresponsibility. This research highlights the struggles that children face as they navigate being the child of a parent with a substance use disorder. Looking at the experiences of children who have lost a parent to drug overdose, Grace, 2012, interviewed 4 girls who had been bereaved by parental drug overdose. She described how the children struggle to, quote, stay on the track instead of going, quote, off the rails. As Grace describes their journey, she relays, quote, none of the girls had made a deliberate choice to be off the rails, yet the environment in which they live meant their life journey is a stormy one, with no safe haven, and their lives have not offered them the lifelines they needed in order to stay on track and navigate their way through this traumatic event, unquote. For the children she interviewed, life after loss was full of complicated grief. The girls described not knowing how to handle the situation and how they feared intrusive memories. They sometimes felt stuck in the past, unable to get over their loss. This left them feeling angry and depressed. Some of the girls described how they channeled their grief into positive outcomes, like feeling impressed by their own resilience and striving to make their parents proud of them, while others felt adrift or unwanted, harmed themselves and others, and asked questions like, why me? Others were angry at feeling like they had to grow up too quickly or were fearful of the future. The stories these bereaved children share allow insight into the complicated grief children experience after the loss of a parent to a substance use disorder overdose incident. So, After understanding that context, what are some of the different outcomes that children experience as a result of their parents' SUD or overdose? The existing literature documents 3 common outcomes: reduced mental well-being, poorer social functioning, and maladaptive coping. Looking at impacts on mental health, Halsey and colleagues 2020 analyzed data from a Pennsylvania county's data tracking system. They found that within 3 months of a parent's overdose-related death, nearly 1 in 10 children were enrolled in mental health services, and after 5 years, nearly 1 in 4 were enrolled in mental health services. This suggests that children's mental health declines after a parental overdose. Then, comparing the rates of suicide among children of parents who misuse opioids versus parents who do not use opioids, Brent and colleagues 2019 found a doubling of the risk of suicide attempts among the children of parents who used opioids. This suggests that not only is overdose risk a factor for decreased mental health, but parental substance abuse as well. Similarly, Romanowitz and colleagues 2019 conducted a systematic review of all the research on the relationship between parental substance misuse and child outcomes, and found that children with parents with substance use disorder had more emotional and behavioral issues like classroom disruption. Next, looking at impacts on social functioning, Pish and colleagues 2018 conducted a systematic review and found that children of parents with opioid addiction have decreased academic, cognitive, and social functioning. The systematic review conducted by Romanowitz and colleagues that I just mentioned found similar results and also found that the children of parents who misuse substances have poorer social skills. Finally, research documents that children of parents who misuse drugs or overdose are at a high risk for engaging in maladaptive coping behaviors, like their own substance misuse or violence. For instance, Mitchell and colleagues 2018 analyzed data from a national sample of youth and found that 8% had experienced a loved one die from a drug overdose. In their study, they found that youth with overdose exposure were more likely to report misusing substances than non-exposed youth. Similar findings are documented by Palumbo and colleagues in 2022. In that study, they found that some children coped with their parents' drug abuse by abusing drugs themselves. Children may also engage in disruptive or violent behaviors to cope, as also documented by Palumbo and colleagues 2022 and Grace 2012. For these children, they recognize that their coping is unhealthy, but they do not know a way to change this behavior. For instance, Grace wrote, quote, "For all of them, their maladaptive behavior, or coping ugly, is an aspect of grief for which they take responsibility to differing degrees, but which they do not feel they have the personal power to change," unquote. Now, let's talk about children's experiences of having a substance use disorder overdose incident. There's very limited research about this topic. However, one study conducted by Bagley and colleagues 2022 lends some insight. Bagley and colleagues interviewed 20 young adults with opioid use disorder who were receiving care from a hospital in Massachusetts. They asked these people about their families' beliefs about opioid use disorder and medication-assisted treatment, and were interested in understanding their experiences because they believed it might lend insight into why young adults with opioid use disorder have low engagement and retention in medication-assisted treatment. Their study produced 3 main findings. First, when children had parents with substance use issues, this made them hesitant to engage in treatment due to, quote, not wanting to turn out like their parents, unquote. Additionally, some children recall their parents' negative experiences with medication-assisted treatment, like with methadone, and its impacts on parental functioning. Second, children shared that their parents and families held negative and stigmatizing views of treatment. For instance, one study participant recalled an interaction with their step-parent. Quote, "Well, my stepdad, he's the one that actually said, 'I'm surprised that this hospital treats you like a patient, especially with you being on that stuff. I'm just like, how are they supposed to treat me? Because I'm on the Suboxone clinic and they're supposed to treat me any less?' Unquote. Finally, children wanted their family to accept them and their treatment, but also felt that keeping treatment decisions private was necessary in some cases. Some felt as though their family members were too engaged in their treatment and didn't share in order to keep some autonomy and privacy. Others didn't engage in treatment because they didn't want to cause their family to worry about them. And still others kept their treatment needs private because they didn't want their families to know they struggle with addiction. Bagley and colleagues' study is really important to our understanding of how children navigate addiction and suggests that stigmatization and family may serve as a barrier to treatment. And with that, we've reached the end of our episode on children's experiences of being a child with an SUD overdose incident and of being the child to a parent with an SUD overdose incident. I hope this episode was interesting and informative for you, and I'll talk to you on the next episode, where we'll be talking about siblings' experiences as both the sibling with an SUD overdose incident and of being the sibling to someone with an SUD overdose incident. As a reminder, if after listening to this episode you need support, please contact the 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. Thank you for listening to the ACE-IT podcast. We love hearing from you. So if you have comments, topics to suggest, or some science you'd like us to cover in a future season, please write to me, Danielle Rudes, at Sam Houston State University in Texas. My email is drudes, D-R-U-D-E-S, at shsu.edu. And of course, thank you to the Justice Community Overdose Innovation Network, JCOIN's Coordination and Translation Center, funded by the National Institute on Drug Abuse, housed at George Mason University, where this podcast originated. Thank you to our fabulous scriptwriter and also my fantastic doctoral student, Bryce Kushmerek McCune. And a huge and heartfelt thank you to the team at Slonky LLC for their wonderful podcast production, as always. Tune in again for another episode of ACE-IT.